Hey, folks, glad you're all here. Uh, just like we were talking about on Friday, me and Baz are going to do the show today. We had a great discussion on raising kids, and so there never will be Game of Thrones talk on this channel. And although everybody should watch that, it's a fun movie or a show, whatever you want to call it. It's a series, I think. Wouldn't that be what you would call it, Baz?
Yeah, series. That's what we call them.
Mm-hmm. Good times, good times. And with that, of course, I always enjoy talking with my brother while we have a pint, and I've just opened my first one. So we were talking about the joys of raising kids and how a father was a necessity, and how to maybe give some motivation to the young men to go out and have babies and enjoy their lives and that kind of thing. Don't get wrapped around the axle too much on politics and that kind of garbage. What's your thoughts on that, brother?
Yeah. Just on reflection of what you said there, brother. It takes um, a male figure in a young man's life to show him the rights and wrongs. And if you don't have that figure, that parent, that guardian that you have, can do their best. If, for example, like in my example, I was brought up by a single parent, my mother, and she did an outstanding job. Struggled to bring both me and my sibling up. And she instilled a set of values that I held to this day, about being polite. You treat people how you'd like to be treated, and obviously that's something you like to pass on. Because at the end of the day, I say it's you can be that sheepdog, but there's times where you need to be that wolf. And especially when it comes
Indeed.
to children, especially in this day and age, certainly in the UK, where the times have changed so much. Where when I was a young man, I was a kid. You could disappear all day, just out with your buddies, out in the woods, in the forest, just riding your bikes, just being, what I mean, young kids. Nowadays,
Oh
kids
yeah.
are you've got to grow. They've got to grow up quick because of the way society is nowadays. I mean, a lot of predators about, and bullying. You look at bullying now; it's a lot. It's like 24/7 bullying because kids nowadays they're plugged into the internet. They're plugged into an alternate reality. If they're not at school, you know what I mean. They're sat behind a screen at home to a certain extent, and the bullying doesn't stop at school because of social media. It can carry on,
I agree.
um,
I
and
agree.
that's something. Yeah, it's something that you sort of need to be on top of as a parent. Um, and I'm one of these guys that I've got a temper a mile wide, but when it comes to my kids, that disappears. It's a fucking touch paper. If it's lit, I'm going off, and somebody's getting the good news. So you become very protective as a child, as a parent, over your children, if you're any kind of parent. And like what we were saying just in the pre-show, our pre-show chat that we usually do, um, especially in our line of work, you have a sort of an element of paranoia. Not so much paranoia, but we said preparedness. You identify threats a lot more. Um,
Built
you could
right
pick up
into
on,
our system.
yeah. People straying out of their lane, and starting to interfere the way you're parenting or interfering within your child's life and stuff like that. And especially when you're out. Let's say if I go out with my kids, I've got an older boy and a younger girl. Um, my son, he's at the age now where he recognises certain threats and stuff like that because he's getting older. But the little one, she's a little girl. She doesn't know the threats yet, so it's my job and a mother's job to obviously identify those threats and keep her safe. And again, like I was going back
Indeed.
to a couple of minutes ago, it's a lot different now than what it was certainly over here in the UK. And again, it depends where you live. If you're living in a city or in a large town somewhere, then you can't just kick your kids out at 8 o'clock in the morning and watch them come back in when the street lights come on, because chances are something's going to happen. They're going to be either snatched, they're going to be hurt in some way. Um, Even sort of going down that scale to where young kids are getting stabbed. There's a lot more sort of gang culture now than there is when we were kids, and obviously that's a long time ago. So it's a scary time for being a parent, and I think the skills that we've honed over the years can, in a way, help as a parent. We're more acute, we're more sort of acute to the threats, and we pick up on it a lot quicker than the average um, civilian slash parent slash whoever would
In,
normally, if you know what I mean.
Indeed, we're a little bit smarter than the average bear. One of the
Yeah,
one of the interesting things is I did not know that you came from a mother. I came from a mother who raised me and my twin sister, and it is a hard way. And I'll never forget. I think maybe I was 4 or 5. Some older kid, probably who knows how old he was, but he wasn't bigger than me, but he was older. So of course I was intimidated. And he smacked me in the face with his fist like you wouldn't believe. I had to be about 3, 4, somewhere around that. And I can't really tell you how old he was, but I know he was older. So I never forget being the little cunt that I was. I go running up to the screen door yelling for my mom. And all of a sudden she locks it and goes, "Go kick his ass." I had blood coming out my nose. I think that was the first time I'd ever bled from a punch. And I went out there and there was a mud puddle, and I remember shoving his face in it, telling him to eat dirt. But yeah, no, I mean, that's just, like you said, a fight, bullying between boys, we get that. But girls, what was that show called? Mean Girls or whatever it was that depicted the way women are just, there's a biological difference and a thought process difference between men and women can be very, very cruel with their words. Where
yeah.
boys, we shrug it off. We're like, yeah, so what? I'm a cunt, you're a cunt, we're all cunts. Wouldn't you like to be a cunny too?
It's with sort of the males. It's a lot more sort of. It goes back to being a pack animal. It's who's the alpha male, and you only get the alpha male through violence and intimidation. Where females, it's fucking psychological. The masters of the mind game. You know, they say stuff that doesn't hurt physically, but mentally it leaves scars, and it can create to a lot of problems. For young ladies, even young men. I like going back to that point where you said where your mum closed the door and said, "Go and kick his fucking ass," and you went out there, stuffed his face in the wood pile. I remember doing that as a kid, where we used to always cut around as like a gang. Not a gang like you would call nowadays, like stabbing and fucking shooting each other and dealing drugs.
Right, it
But
was
just
more like, it
a
was,
gang of kids. It was like an innocent age, but there
yeah,
was still that element of pack mentality where
yep.
there was another gang that we had to go and fight them. You know what I mean? Where we'd fucking run up with them with lumps of wood and start throwing stones and rocks at them, and then it degenerated into a fist fight. And whoever walked away,
Always.
it was bragging rights. Where nowadays, a kid gets punched in the face, that kid goes punch another in the face, and before you know it, he's been stabbed. I mean, all joking aside about the knife ban and shit like that, but like knife crime over here in the UK is pretty much out of control. It's
Skyrocketing.
not it's not as bad as the media make out, but in certain areas, London, places like in Birmingham, it is the main sort of cause of deaths in young gang related, gang age males. Because and when they say knives, we're not talking butter knives. Some of these guys are walking around with short swords stuffed down tracksuit bottoms, machetes. You've seen the wasp knife that sends a jet of CO2
Oh, yeah.
into its victim. Yeah,
Massive damage.
yeah. Getting theirs, trench knives are popular because obviously you've got the brass knuckle, the knife, and the spike. So it's and a lot of this is just legacy stuff that kids are picking up. Again, the internet, you can buy stuff on the internet.
Yep.
Yeah, it's massive over here. So nowadays, I'm more acute to telling my son to go out and punch some fucker in the face because he's been bullied. I've been lucky. Well, it's a double-edged sword because obviously when I was in the military, the my son lived on camp quite a lot,
Right, right,
and because you're in a bubble of security where there's no knife crime, no one's going to get stabbed. You know what I mean? It's like the old days where someone punches him, he comes home crying with a lump on his cheek, and I'm saying, right, about turn, go and kick his fucking head in, you know. And once he's laid on the floor and you've broken his nose, then come back to me. And if his parents knock on the door, they'll get the same fucking. You know what I mean? Look, it's boys fighting.
right,
Get the
right,
fuck off my doorstep. Where once you're sort of outside that bubble, and unfortunately the way society is nowadays, you're a lot more sort of defensive about things, and you've got to sort of eradicate that pack mentality, that alpha male. Where my son comes in, for example, and he's got a black eye, I can't then turn around and say, "Go and kick his fucking head in," depending on where you're living and the demographic. You mean the demographic that you're living around.
right, right.
If you're living in a rural area where it is basically, a small village or a small town where knife crime or gun crime or whatever gang crime is very, very, mild, marginal or small, then you can have that attitude. But certainly the way that society is going nowadays, it's only going to get worse. So you've got to think of ways to arm your children better, not with just what I mean by arm. I don't mean like is a
Right.
fucking
You mean
blade or
right.
is a 6 hour. You know what I mean? I'm talking in ways that you can arm them. And what we were talking about earlier, the street smarts. You know what I mean? You have to give your children, like we have, a toolbox, a skill set to stay alive and stay safe. And one of those is through unarmed combat. Be it boxing, be it kickboxing, karate, judo, aikido, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Kempo, Wing Chun, fucking ever,
Right.
whatever works. We've all been in fist fights as kids and obviously as adults, where things sort of degenerate, where you're actually trying to harm that other person, not just win the fight. You're trying to harm that other person, neutralize the threat, and all that stuff. So
Oh, of
you've got to,
course, as
you've
a
got, yeah,
soldier, that's our job. Uh, Kick things,
yeah,
break things, yeah, and people.
bite, headbutt,
Yeah.
gouge, all that
Yeah.
good stuff. Um, so there's that element that you've got to arm your children with the means to defend themselves, but also arm your children with that conflict management skill that as law enforcement and soldiers, military are adept at. Where you've stared down the barrel of a gun in Central Africa, or you're getting a knife pressed against your throat after things have got out of hand when you're an R&R in Central America, by example, where you've got to use those street smart skills, like your silver tongue, your reasoning, your conflict management to get yourself and your team, your friends out of that position, and that's what you've got to arm your children with nowadays. It's not just all sunshines and rainbows.
Right.
Um,
Like verbal judo, where you're
yeah,
just like, I understand that, but what, you just deflect the conversation. It's
yeah,
interesting when there's a lot of different skill sets, even though a soldier, Marine, of course, you guys have Royal Marine Commandos on your side of the pond, right?
yeah,
We just have a Marine Corps. It's slightly larger by like 100 and some thousand,
yeah,
but but it's still the same thing. Hurt people, break things. That's kind of the thing that we're trained to do. But there's also on the LEO side, the law enforcement officer side, which I know you've worked around, and without getting into your background story, but there's a way that 99% of the time, that's why there's a joke in the law enforcement community that 99.9% of police officers will never draw their gun to shoot somebody, maybe to defuse the situation, something like that.
yeah,
But they'll never have to squeeze that trigger. And then you have the zero point 0.1 or 0.01% that will have to. And that's a different story. It takes it to a different level. But what we're with talking about raising our children, the interesting part, I think we've touched on it slightly, is that there seems to be a trend that families who have service, have served in every continent that I know of, everybody I know, except for I think I met the first guy, and he said he did have an aunt or somebody, but he wasn't close to it, but he saw the picture, who actually served. And he said, well, I don't really know if that was the reason why I went in the military, but it's usually somebody in the family did it, and they're, oh, I remember he did it, so I can do it. And I remember what got me through it, and probably
Yeah,
you too, honestly, Baz,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
is going through basic training, and then your schooling. I remember thinking, millions of people have done this before me. I'm no better and no worse. And that was really the thing that pushed me to. And also, when you're going through it, it sounds like horrible when people talk about it, but you just minus like 17 times less because
yeah,
you're going through it with your brothers. And
yeah,
that's something I guess we impart to our kids too. What's your thoughts on that?
yeah. It's a close circle of friends can make life a whole lot easier. I was lucky when I was a kid; I had good friends. You know, obviously, I came through my military career. I had really good friends. Lost a lot of friends. Lost most of my friends, to be honest, through either killed in action or through just natural causes, road traffic accidents, and that circle shrinks. You know what I mean? And it does
Yep.
strengthen you, and you treasure your friends more. Um, yeah, it does make life a lot easier. It's that shared pain, that shared experience, um, especially when you're growing up. And again, it's hard for the children of military men and women because you move around so often, So that the friends that you have as short term friends, you might make that one or two long term friend, but again, it's when that parent or that guardian leaves the military that that child is then thrown into the mix. Let's just say that in the mix with the rest of the kids. You know what I mean? And that's difficult. And I've seen it recently with my own son, um, living that bubble of safety and security, and you know what I mean. It hark back to the old times because, like I said earlier, there's not much crime on in the military community because of the
Right.
values that we instill with each other and to our children. So you do find that military children are generally better behaved than and those of law enforcement and other emergency services, or just people with good values and standards, if you know what I mean. That the kids aren't going to be cunts. They aren't going to go fucking stabbing people, knocking old people over to take, you know what I mean, the money
Right.
out the handbag or the pocket, you know. And it's when you take them out that bubble and you put them into society that you do see that your child, and it does hurt, is behind the times. You know what I mean? You do see them struggle, and you do see them starting having to interact with other people that they're unsure of because you come from a military family. Your mum, they're in the military. They're a soldier. Be it they're a medic, they're a chef, they're a fucking an infantry soldier. They're whatever.
They're
You know,
MLS, yeah.
yeah, yeah. They've got something in common where they leave and they go there, and they might be in a school with three kids from the traveling community. They might be with three Asian kids whose parents are strict Muslims. They might be with some kids that mums and dads are absolute fucking lumps of shit. They might be with some kids whose parents are executives. You know what I mean? There's the diverse mix, and you've got to see your child sort of guide them into that right group of people, if you know what I mean.
I do. I remember, and also I think as a parent, especially in this day and age when so many families are so broken, um, I've been fortunate, 26 years going on of marriage. And I honestly feel that, I don't feel, I know. First off, I've encouraged young men and helped them to get into special operations and the military, told them what to expect without bullshit. And now, of course, the military, and probably in England too, it's a kinder, more gentler military.
Hmm.
But it's not as rough as it was when we were in, where they could actually lay hands on you, but they weren't supposed to. But if you said
Yeah,
something, you were an alligator, i.e., you were making an allegation, and it wasn't taken so lightly, or so it wasn't taken so strongly. It was taken more lightly. You know, they do an investigation. It was a real investigation instead of you just said so, so we have to believe you. That
yeah,
kind of shit.
yeah.
Um, and
That's a good topic that we can come on to maybe either later on or on a different show. Is the difference between the military then and now? Because as like you joined the army at a time where we were waiting for the army to roll over the East German border to fighting counter-terrorism warfare across the globe. You know what I mean? Like obviously, like the guys in
right.
the US call it the global war on terror. You know what I mean? How warfare's changed so
Oh yeah.
massively, and in a short period of time. You know what I mean? If you think from like the late '90s to the early 2000s, it was a period of 4 years that it's just boom. The world has fucking changed massively.
The
Now, obviously,
world.
I'm going to say we weren't lucky enough. We weren't lucky, but we had a sort of a heads up. We had a step up on obviously the guys in the US because we'd been living with terrorism for so long. With obviously
Oh
the
yeah.
provisional IRA and all those fucking idiots over the water. So we were sort of ahead of the curve, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah.
And
The
to put it bluntly, without sounding callous or cruel, because that is nowhere my intention. Once the planes hit, it's like
wake up.
wake up, welcome to terrorism. If you
Yeah.
know what I mean.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you guys have been dealing with the IRA, and of course here in America, it's no joke. The Irish community was helping fund it, along with senators like Ted Kennedy and the Kennedy
yeah,
clan.
yeah,
But also, you had the Malayan conflict, which was a precursor to our Vietnam. That's why your SAS boys and your SBS boys were so valuable when they came over to Vietnam. A lot of people don't realize the British did help. And the other one was the Omani conflict.
yeah,
And I mean, England has always, and I don't know if it's by design or just because how many places were colonies. I mean, shit, if you want to get technical, we were probably the only successful um, colony to break
breakaway
that way.
colony.
Yeah, and just like you know, I mean, George Washington was born in England, and they
Yeah,
have his house.
he
Yeah,
was a soldier in the British Army.
yeah, and when he came over here, he was a soldier during the French and Indian War.
Yeah,
And I mean, so people forget where revolutionaries come from. I hate that adage: one man's patriots, another man's, and they actually stem it from Washington. But one man's patriot is, or one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. If you're a terrorist and you're doing it, there are other methods in a civil society. If you're talking the wilds of untamed America, that's a different story. If you're talking the wilds of wherever, but when you're in a civilization like Ireland, Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland, uh, those are civil societies where words can do more than violence. If you know what I mean, does that make sense, brother?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so it's a good topic that we can touch on either later on or on another show. Is just the difference of how our men and women have to fight and the way that I've seen come on massively. And if the army is, when I say army, I mean military in general, is different from what
Right.
it was to where it is. It's a completely different animal now, for better and for worse. But going back to our conversation
Yep.
on kids, and obviously you said guiding people into the military and especially into the Special Operations Forces (SOF) is it's because you know of the skill sets that person will pick up, what skill sets that person will bring. And it's not just that; it's just to get the best out of that young person. It goes back to being a mentor. You would give this information and this guidance and to just any random Joe. You know what I mean? It's obviously someone that you've seen fit to mentor, or they've
Yep.
approached you and they want you to mentor them. It might not be a son, a daughter, a sibling, a family member. Might be someone that's like myself and you. We grew up without that father figure, if you know what I mean. So a mentor can come from anywhere. A mentor can come from outside. Now I was pretty unlucky because
Exactly.
I didn't have a mentor, and the mentor. Well, I won't call them mentors, but the sort of elder male characters in my life. And when I say my life, it was sort of like late teens, early 20s when I joined the military, weren't conducive to bringing me on as a person, bringing me on as a soldier.
Right.
It was, and we've spoke about this offline, and I won't go into it too much, but there weren't good people, And yes, they were in the military, like any other military in the world. The 99% of the military is outstanding that follow that code, those what we call it, or in the UK, and those in the UK military values and standards and the leadership code,
Right. Right.
and some don't. Unfortunately, the ones that didn't got the claws into me. Um, and I had to learn the hard way. I became my own mentor in a way because I had to. I had to realize what was right and what was wrong. So it's sort of I've learned the hard way. I've not had the benefit of a constant mentor in my life. Um, and I think what it was is myself and my friend who you always have that one friend in the military or in the law enforcement or wherever.
Right.
Even as a civilian, you'll have that one best friend, that one close friend that you work with, you live with, and you rely on each other. Especially in the military, where that becomes to saving your life. That person can pull you out of a firefight. That person can patch you up if you're wounded, and that person will slip you $100 when you're on your ass. You know what I mean? Because you've got not a penny to your name.
Right.
And you become a mentor for each other. So it doesn't have to be that older man. It could be just someone in the same boat. You know, that might
Exactly.
have. They might even not have as much experience as you, but they might have more life experience. If you know what I mean. And what I mean by life experience is, I joined the military at a young age. Um, Prior to that, I was working in a slaughterhouse, which obviously was a fucking horrible job. Um, and then I joined. So I've had no real life experience. I'll put that in quotation marks as a civilian, as functioning as a fucking proper human being. Because let's be
Right.
honest, we're absolute fucking animals in the military. We are a pack of fucking creatures, you know.
Yep.
And again, I'll use the adage for better for worse. Um, Only sort of now when I've transitioned or transitioning into society, that I've got no real life experience because I've been in that military bubble for such a long time, for a quarter of a century. Um,
Yep.
and I'm using my experience and my skills and the stuff I've gone through to guide my son and in a way guide my daughter, because again, I'm lucky enough that my children have got an outstanding mother. You know what I mean? That
Right.
that can show both my son and my daughter the rights and wrongs. But as my firstborn and my eldest, he's my son, and he's going to be the man of the family one day, and he's going to have a family of his own, inshallah. But
Yep. Yep.
it,
And
it
he
yeah, go
will
on, brother.
he will take over the house of Baz.
Yeah,
I will say this, brother. Uh, I agree totally. It's that all neighborhood kids that I've met, from my son growing and now out of the house and whatnot. Um, I didn't cotton to because there were, and I would be honest with my son. This person, and I was always proven right. And finally, he's like, "Damn, Dad, you might know something." Well, yeah, and I did have an opposite experience of from than you did. I had in my youth gentlemen that were never mentors, but they were elders in the family or something like uncles, whatever, right? Or even family friends. But I wouldn't consider them mentors. It wasn't until I went in the military at 17 that I actually got mentored, where, somebody who knows their shit, but they were good dudes. They weren't, it wasn't as adverse. And so I grew from 17 Think about this. Every 17-year-old knows everything. You can't tell them anything, and I was no different, right? I knew everything, and everybody else was wrong. Go into the military where you're wrong all the time, and you're like, no, I'm not. No, the hell, I'm not on this. And of course, you're going to be wrong. And it's only because of mentoring that I snapped out of that. And that was a long process, because everybody's a know-it-all in their teens. And I would say probably by 20, I'd snapped out of it. And that's my thoughts on it. And I sort of point that out to the youth too. I mean, you can know everything because of Google, but it doesn't make
Yeah,
you right. Just like
yeah,
if we get into an argument, and I've done this too, I'm no better than anybody else. I hate arguing because it's so flippin' retarded, because loud doesn't make it right. I can't yell at you, Baz, and say, da, 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 and be right if I'm totally wrong. And
yeah,
that's the retardation of youth. And when I say retardation, I mean it in the classical sense. A lack of growth. It's retarded in growth. It doesn't mean mentally handicapped like a lot of people always want to say when you use that terminology. And that's another thing. The youth, because of this whole, and of course we're on YouTube and everything, but because of this entire computer generated false reality, our kids, I believe, even though I kept my son grounded, getting him out, not grounded as you can't leave the house, but grounded to terra firma. I got him out there for the first time for his cold weather survival training. He's an Eagle Scout in the Boy Scouts when it was the Boy Scouts. Um, he's a Marine now. And a lot of the young men that I've had the privilege, and I mean this, the privilege of mentoring, have turned out to be outstanding human beings. And I only do that because I had such epic mentors, and the only thing that was ever said to me were three things: I could leave anytime, they could kick me out anytime, because if I wasn't progressing to the way they were, if I thought they weren't giving me anything, I could leave. And the last thing is, and they all were in common with this, the only thing they ask is do it for somebody else. And at 50, going on 51, uh, I feel pretty fulfilled in that. And I think that's something I think young men should think about. Your thoughts?
yeah. Certainly, when you go on about like keeping your kids grounded and stuff like that, again, it comes down to the way you guide them, and it's. I think when you mentioned about being online and stuff like that, how your child or your mentee is affected by that is when we were kids, and we keep going on about it because we're old bastards, but when we were kids, our circle of influence was very small, as in outgoing and incoming. We could influence those around us, our best friends, our siblings, and little Johnny down the street, I'd influence his nose with my fist, and my circle was very small. It was sort of like neighborhood, regional, very local. You had a local influence, if you know what I mean. Nowadays, kids can be influenced by anything. You could be influenced by Japanese culture, the youth culture. You could be influenced by gang culture, US gang culture. The when I mean by gang culture, like the gangster rap culture, anything. The influence now, outgoing and ingoing, is huge. I can
I
influence
agree.
a kid in South Africa, you know, because I can get in touch with them. I can influence a Russian fucking billionaire by speaking to him and offering my thoughts, my opinions, and vice versa. We can influence each other because obviously our circle's larger because of social media, and our socials, and obviously our circle's larger because we're brothers in arms, we've fought the same fight, and all that good stuff. So again, we've got that same background, we've got that same mentality,
I do know. Yeah, I know where you're
So
coming from, brother.
you you've got to be acutely aware that you, when we were young people, that one or whoever we had as a mentor, if we were lucky enough to have a mentor, was chances are that was the main input into how we grew as young people. Where now you've got to make yourself the main one. You can't afford to be battling against social media, against mainstream media, against the mouthpiece of the local college that your kid goes to, so you can't stop that. You can't put your kid in a bubble, and you can't stop outside influences. But what we've got to realize as old bastards now is that our kids are going to be a lot more aware of what's going on in the world than we ever were. Uh,
I
uh, uh, yeah, go on.
I totally agree, brother. I mean, you have all of society pushing for this weird thing that we both know it's not counterintuitive. It's very intuitive if people understood it. But because the wall did fall in communism, except for in China, which is watered down communism, honestly, it's more oligarchical in structure. But the interesting thing is all of this counterculture, which I think we're now the counterculture, honestly, but what used to be called the counterculture of the left, uh, has been subverting our culture. Your thoughts on
Yeah,
that? Because I think we're saying the same thing, just different ways.
yeah. It's as if all these different elements and all these different approaches are all vying for the sort of attention of, when I say our children, but our children are going to grow into this. And like what I was saying there, our kids now at 15, 16, 17, 18 are as culturally aware as we are now, because we're late bloomers. We didn't
Yep.
know. We couldn't, probably as kids, we couldn't point out where Iraq was. We couldn't tell you about Islamic fundamentalism, not just much that, but as Islamic cultures and traditions, Chinese cultures and traditions, Hispanic cultures and traditions, especially in the US. Where kids nowadays, because they're open, they've got any information in the history of man, usually in the land, where we had to learn. They don't have to learn; they can just look it up.
Yeah, and they can get a lot of bad info that way. I remember having to go to the actual military library when we were going to go to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to look up Iraq, Kuwait, and the KSA, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to find out what kind of culture and stuff. And I'll never forget the idiocracy of mine. You'll laugh about this. I was like looking up the temperatures, and I'm like, okay, 140, which it was when we landed there on August 7th in the kingdom. And then the lowest temperature that they have is in the winter, and that's 80 degrees. And I'm like, shit, I don't even have to take a coat. I can just pack light. I'm going to be in the
Mm.
desert. And oh man, when wintertime came, that 80 degrees hit, I remember shivering. And finally, I got our night camis issued to us, and I got a picture of that. I should put it on the. Anyways, I can't now. But anyways, looking at the thermometer, and it said 80 degrees, and I was shivering like a little frozen dog. And I'll never forget that. And that's the fallacy of information sometimes. Your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah, let's say we had to go around things the hard way, the long way. Where nowadays the kids are a lot savvy, and you've got to, again, without digressing, because we go that digressing. I think we'll bring it back on track. We've got to sort of guide our kids to the right information, and to never trust the information that is at first hand. You know what I mean? Always trust information from different sources.
Yes.
And that goes from anything. That's advice. You might be an absolute ninja when it comes to one certain thing. If I'm not, I'll say, ask your mum. I mean, she's a lot better at that than I am.
Same here,
Um,
brother. I stay in my lane.
yes, that's it. Stay in your lane. But again, you've got to guide them to which lane to be in. You know what I mean? again, because you don't want them seeing pulled one way when you can see yourself that's not the right direction that kid needs to be in. Um, and again, you've only got a small margin of chance to pull them back into the right lane, especially as they get older. When they're young kids, like mine pretty much I've got a bit of leeway, I've got a bit more time to play with, you know what I mean, where I can spend longer going, no, you want to come this way, you come this way. But at some point, we've got to remember that we're going to be out of touch, you know, and it could be our kids turning around and going, Dad, shut the fuck up. You're
Yep.
talking shit.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I'm a subject matter expert at this. This is what's going on. And again, it comes down to mentorship. Just because I'm X amount of fucking generations older than my kids, there's nothing to say that in 10 years, my son can't be a mentor to me on certain things.
Hell yeah.
You know, so it's that reverse mentorism. I think that's a word that we can use. Um,
I agree. That's a great
that
word.
And if you've been a good mentor to them, then you're just enabling them to be a better mentor than you'll ever be. If you know, because they can only they can take the good from you, the bad from you, and just think, right, let's get rid of that shit that the dad used to tell me, and I'll use that, and I'll add my own spin to it, and they can only be better, especially if you get your kids used to criticism. You know what I mean? And just say,
Yep.
look, when someone's telling you you're doing something wrong, don't be defensive straight away. Take that step back and think, okay, this person's told me this. Is he right? He might be completely fucking wrong, but I'll reflect on what he says. Go away, give it 24 hours, come back and say, okay, John, yeah, I'm happy with that. Thanks for your criticism, pal. And I'll improve. Or go back and say, John, you were wrong. You know what I mean? And then that's mentoring that person. Again, and you can only, again, make that person that you're mentoring, let's say, I'm using my example as my son, a better mentor than you, if
Oh,
you know what I mean.
I agree totally. It's just like when I was training Iraqi police. I mean, this I have to put things in different boxes that I guess I'm trying to give parables, which is probably stupid. But I can tell you, even some of them that were old, they'd never had a structured class. If that makes sense to you, because some of these people came straight out of the desert,
Yeah,
and all of a sudden they'd get my class and they'd be like, whoa, things are opening up to them. And I stand on my record, and we are talking about our children while we discuss this. It's the same purpose. I've been told, no, Mr. Schuff, you're wrong. And I'd be like, well, how? And they'd tell me. And I actually, just like you said, it's an open and honest discussion that you have to have with anybody, including your children or the neighborhood kids. And there has to be input coming back and going out. And I can honestly say I learned more in my going on 51 years now, old bastard that I am, brother, just like you. I've learned more from my students than I ever gave them, and my mentees. And I'm a big advocate of mentorism, just like you are. And that's why I think the positivity with us flows so well because we do understand. I know the last show, I've got a pulmonary appointment sometime. I don't know when the doctor's going to get a hold of me. But yeah, it's not looking good on my lung infection, so we'll see how that rolls. Just an update for you, I guess, for the audience too, brother.
yeah, that sounds shit, brother. I hope
Yeah.
everything's good.
But
We're falling
yeah,
to bits. We're falling to bits. I think that's what it is. We're just getting old and falling to bits. I'm waiting on a knee operation, you know. So I think we'll obviously it's not as bad as yours, but again, it's just the price to pay. We get old.
it is. It's not the I somebody was joking around with me and he said, I'm older than you, this, that, and the other, and it's one of my mentors actually from the army, and I said, it's not the years, boy, it's the miles, and he's older than me, right?
Yeah,
But he didn't go the places I've gone, done the things I've done, and trust me, I am not the biggest baddest. You know this, Baz. Uh, but I have a good name, and I'll never forget these army guys back in Afghanistan one time were humping, going somewhere, doing things. You know how it is, up hills, down hills. And you know what I mean by hills, mountains. And they'd
Yeah.
be like, he's lagging. A couple people stay with him, and I'd be like, go up there. If I croak out, if I have a heart attack or a stroke, don't worry about me. Birds need to eat too, brother.
I've got a white foss. Deny myself in situ.
There you go, baby. It's all good. I got a buckeye around my neck everywhere I go, and my body will make that buckeye grow with all the nutrients that it will leach into the soil.
You still there, brother?
Yeah, yeah, I'm still
Yeah.
here. I was just
Oh,
letting you
that's good.
roll.
Yeah. No, obviously, because I'm having internet problems again. Um, yeah, again, it's when it comes to your menteeism and your mentorism, it's you got to as a mentor as well. You've got to choose the right person, to a certain extent. I mean,
True.
it is. I mean, I'm lucky because I've spent a lot of my career as an instructor, um, teaching a lot of things to a lot of people, and there's been times or standout points in my career where I've just gone, that person there, and a good friend of mine who's just left the military. Met him back in like sort of mid 2000s, something like that, and he just happened to turn up at one of my courses, and just the way our careers panned out, we've always bumped into each other, and for the past few years, been working with each other. Um, and I've had chance to not so much mentor him because he'd come into his own, if you know what I mean, but because
Right.
he worked for me in obviously as the military goes about. He was sort of like directly below me, and I've had chance to do it again, but not just as a mentor, but as a friend as well. But there is people out there that
Isn't
you
that the
try.
best when you
Yeah,
get a
it's
yeah.
amazing. I mean, and we speak to each other every day. We speak every single day. Um, but there is on the flip side to it, there is people that you can try and guide that are just lost souls or a lost cause. That no matter how much time you put in, they are never going to come out at the end, finish your journey or finish their journey with you in a good place. And it's very rare, but I've seen it happen on a couple of occasions, where that person is just, again, that outside influence has overwritten the influence that you're putting in, no matter how many hours or how many days or to what end you're putting out, or what sort of like skill sets or advice or information or whatever you're putting into that relationship between the pair of you, has been overwritten by something stronger, and that
I
might be misinformation, that might be, we've all seen it as young soldiers, that might be a girlfriend. I don't want you to be in the military anymore. If you love me, you'll get out. They get out the military, and within 4 or 5 months, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, as I've said. On the outside, they're single, and it's like, what the fuck have I done? I've got out the military, and this has gone wrong. This has gone wrong. This has gone wrong. I cannot rejoin, and therefore, and you lose touch with these people, and they go their own way. And the next time you see them, they're an alcoholic or they've got a dead end job.
I completely agree with you, brother. And here's why I'll say this: as a young man, I mean, of course, it wasn't a woman or anything. I had a great mentor. I think I'll just call him Jack because that was his first name. But he was in the military, the Marine Corps with me. Claude and other people who were in the military will know who I'm talking about. He did his best, okay? But I was not quite broken out of the paradigm that I was in. And I was substandard, honestly. I mean, you have to look back on your life and see every mentor I've had except for one, and that was him. I've exceeded. But with him, I think there was an issue, and it wasn't his fault. Maybe it was my fault. And see, this is where the age kicks in, and I understand who I am. And the interesting thing is I know at that point, all I cared about, honestly, besides doing my job and everything was my time off, my liberty, and getting some ass.
Mm.
And I just didn't devote the time. I was doing my job. I was decent at my job. I'll never say I was the best at anything. I'm, I've been called a subject matter expert on certain things, but that's bullshit too, in my opinion. When people say that, I think it's a it just self-aggrandizement beyond the pale. But I did fell him, and the problem is I'll never be able to tell him that because nobody knows where he's at or even if he's alive. Um, just like we had a brother Boudreaux, I will just say his first name. He died in a motorcycle accident, and I linked up with a brother of mine, and he told me about this because they were best friends in the Marine Corps. I think they might have been enlisted together. And he told me Boudreaux died in a motorcycle accident from a drunk driver. And that really hurt my soul because there's a picture I posted, where I post pics, and it was because I've got a couple other shots. I got to find them, but like you said earlier, a loss isn't always in combat. It can be back home.
Mm.
And this guy was a stellar dude, and he was on his way to an actual symposium to talk about things that he's was great at, and it took some irresponsible dude to get behind the wheel and take out a motorcycle, and that saddens me.
They're
Breaks.
the hardest ones. They're the hardest losses, I think. The ones that you don't see
Yep.
coming.
Yep.
Yeah, it's and again motorbikes. I've lost a few friends on motorbikes and nearly been killed myself on a motorbike. Again, a story for
Me
another day.
too.
It's it's just they're the hardest ones where you go to work one day, you try and you're shooting the shit with them, and then 2 hours later you get a phone call on the way home they were killed by a truck or they've died of cancer, or you know what I mean. You see them at one point in your life where they're a very good friend of mine, one of my brothers. Died a couple of years ago, and I remember him as I would say the closest thing I had to a mentor. Um, he was a few years older than me, about 3, 4 years older than me, and he was in the army as I was joining the army. He was already an NCO. He was a sniper, and that's where the sort of like I looked at him and I thought that's where I want to be. You know what I mean? He's a young lad joining the army, and I was just like your butt foot grunt. You know what I mean? Just fucking up left, right, and centre. Um, Carrying a machine gun, getting punched in the face because I fucked up. And then I looked and I was like, that's where I want to be. I want to be where Will is now. You know what I mean? As a sniper, and just the respect people had for him. And he got left alone because he was a sniper. And that's what sort of led me down my path towards that sort of career choice. And I remember him as this guy because obviously we're quite renowned as being big drinkers, the British. And especially when you join the army, back then it was a massive drinking culture. It was almost enforced drinking culture. Like it was sort of like enforced fun, if you know what I mean. Everybody was just right here. There's a drink. Get a drink. Why are you not drunk yet? And I remember just sitting in his room,
Right.
listening to rock music, playing the guitar, and we'd do a bottle of Jack Daniels each a night and a bottle of Coke, and and that would sort of get the party started. We'd have a few more drinks, a few more guys would come around, would have some more drinks. Then I'd be suffering the next day. I'd be just getting out of my bed, and Will had come running in after a 13-mile run and light up a rollie, and I'm just thinking, how the fuck can you do that? He's an absolute machine. And that's the Will I remember. Up until a couple of years ago, he had throat cancer, and obviously I saw him the day before he passed. Again, some brothers had got together to go and see him,
Right.
and it was just a skeleton, And I was like, fucking, and obviously he's gone. Again, raise my glass to Will because he was one of the best.
Raising now.
And he left the military after a good few years, and he didn't go down the right path. He didn't do anything wrong. He just from where he was, he went sort of like down, and he was just dead end jobs. But at the end of the day, he was happy in himself. You know what I mean? Once he found out he was ill, he he uh, he really did make the most out of life. You know, I mean, this is a guy that used to walk around in black jeans, a Slayer t-shirt or a Metallica t-shirt, loud motorbike, leather jacket, hard drinking, hard partying, to someone who, when he found out he was terminally ill, took up opera singing at a professional level,
Awesome.
um, decided to become a marine biologist, and bought himself an £800 or round about $1,200 pair of Italian leather shoes. Had them specifically made for him, because it was just like his own personal bucket list. Although he didn't say this is what I want to do before I died, he just went on his own journey. Took up sea kayaking and all that good stuff. And it's sort of that admiration I have for him, that sort of adversity that he was facing, and he just like, fuck it. Before I go, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and he went out and did it. But I think that what we need to do, coming back onto our conversation, is sort of instill that into our young people. Like, for that.
Yes.
Don't wait for that. If you're going to do something, fucking do it. And if they do want to do something, either your mentee or your kid, is you've got to get behind them 110%. It's easy to sit there as a parent and your son or your daughter going, Dad, do you want to come and watch me at the game this weekend, or do you want to come and watch me? And you're like, I had other things planned. You've got to sort of then take a step back. And again, when you're going on to like mentorism and that criticism, you've got to critique yourself a lot. And I think that's what I've done a lot more in my
Exactly.
older life than I did as a young. I sort of critique myself more than anybody else now. Is especially I had my marriage pile in about just over a year and a half ago, and it's sort of like, what went wrong in my marriage, and I know what went wrong. I know where I went wrong in that marriage, and so it's obviously took a few months of sulking and drinking, you know what I mean, and trying to fucking drown that pain. That it's sort of like that self realization fucked it up, you know. And that's where you've got to sort of do yourself every single day, is critique yourself, take that step back, take a deep breath, and go, they're asking me to do this for a reason. It's because, one, they want to spend time with me. They want to show me how proud they are of themselves doing something. And then it's your duty. It's your fucking duty. Let's be honest. It's not because you're a dad or you're a mom or whatever. It's your fucking duty. It's to get behind that 100% and show them that you're proud, that they're proud. Let's say pride's a sin. It's not, in a certain way. Self pride of doing a good job, you should be proud of that. Although you don't have to run around saying, look what I did, look what I did. Because kids do learn that self depreciation, but you've got to sort of like drive that to be good at something. You know what I mean? What are your thoughts on that, mate?
Well, try to be the best you can. And what you said earlier really, it strikes me as awesome, but I also have to throw a warning. Here's where I failed with my mentor that I failed. Okay, that's why I failed, was my own failure. Looking back on it, like you said, with old age, being old bastards that we are, brother, mean bastards, right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing that I do remember, and it's easy to slip back into, and I've done it. Trust me. I am the best critique critiker. No, that's not right. I'm the best at critiquing myself, but that critique I can turn into self-loathing
Mm.
very quickly, and that's the bugaboo about that in youth. With age, I've learned that, yeah, okay, I can trust me. You could talk smack about me and shit about me all day long, and it's not going to bother me unless I take it and I'm like, he's got a point. But instead of just taking your point, I will take it to a deeper level of loathing, and that is the problem. In all honesty, I think the balance you really don't. What's that old adage? Youth is wasted on the young.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll never forget. I brought it up earlier. My son and I, I think it was minus 5 degrees, and I knew it was going to be that cold. We had snow on the ground, and I said, well, here's where you learn how, and it's a baby step, right? But you'll understand what I'm talking about this, because it's a way you can test yourself without going out into the far out beyond where there's no help. I took him out to the backyard. I said, we're making a tarp tent tonight. You and I are sleeping out here, and I'll show you how to do it. And that was a personal test for him and me. And I think he was 14 or 15 when I did that. And of course, I got a fire going, put the tarps up, put some of those space blankets up all over to retain the heat from the fire. And that's how we camped out all night. And he woke up. He's like, I couldn't stop sweating. Of course, sleeping bags, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but you learn to take off your clothes and to be, where you need to be in your time. I got out of my bag, put my clothes on in my bag, and I was like, see? And he goes, Dad, it wasn't bad. That was the coolest thing. And that's one of the best memories he has, is that he was able to go out and survive overnight. Of course, it sucks in the middle of the night or when all of a sudden it starts getting cold and you got to throw some more wood on the fire that's outside the tent, and you got to put it to where the smoke's not coming, not tent, but tarp. It was just he was like, I never would have thought you could have done that. And I said, yeah, this is your introduction. He's from the north, man. And he is the last member of the house chef, and he will, I hope, pass that on to his progeny. By the way, my wife told me one of our shows, or maybe another show, was the first one he listened to, and he said he cracked up when I was talking about what's his name, Bradley Manning, and said, whatever. But it was funny, Oven meant Bradley, whatever. Caroline.
Chef Junior.
Yeah.
Chef Junior, say Steve Buddy. Raise my glass for the Chef Junior.
Always, brother. Always. Our houses are joined over the pond.
Yeah. Yeah, going back to your point there, and it's you say youth is wasted on the young. And I think what it is, it's to self-loathing and things like that. Yeah. It's because time's shorter. When you fuck up as a kid or a young man, you've got time to correct that path.
Yes.
Where the fallout of your actions are as severe as they are now. And I'll use the collapse of my marriage as sort of an example where you sit back and you go, what the fuck? And it's easy to fall into that self-loathing, of that blame, and you can take yourself off to a dark place. Obviously, that dark place is fed by other things that have happened in your life, and might be the financial situation or your work situation, your health, and stuff like that, and that's why it's easy to self-loathe as you get older, purely because you don't have as much time as the young to put that right, and so you're a lot more harsh on yourself and things like that. You know what I mean? So yeah, I can see where you're coming from on that one.
Exactly.
So it's a difficult one, and again, you've just got to learn. And again, you can still learn as an old mean bastard, as an OMB, that every day is a school day, as I say. Every day is a fucking school day, where it becomes to the point where that self-loathing isn't healthy or isn't conducive to you being a better person, because you can improve yourself as a person up until the day that you take your last breath.
I agree completely.
And only sort of like recently, where when you're in the military, you've always got that point where you're improving yourself, especially as a young man, a young soldier, or a young Marine, where you're out to prove yourself. And yourself, especially in the military, and I would dare say in law enforcement, it's all about reputation. Once that reputation's been shattered, it's very hard to do a regain, where people are going to trust you. And again, when you're in Afghanistan, in the mountains, when you're in southern Afghanistan and Helmand, in and out the greens, whether you're in Baghdad, Fallujah, wherever. And
Maseree.
yeah, those people around you are looking to you to operate, and it's very hard to do that for both parties if that trust's been broken because you've been a fuck up or you've broken trust, and you know what I mean, and things like that. So yeah, it's quite important, bro. It's quite important.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. The funniest thing is, it's funny when and situations do present themselves when people are like, "What the fuck, dude?" And you're like, "You know what the fuck I do for a living? I bodyguard people." "Well, did you bodyguard this person?" "No, I didn't bodyguard that person. That person's a piece of shit. Let me tell you about him." But you will have situations where you do have to answer for what you've done. But then everybody does not always know the backstory, and this is something I found with age too. And you can disagree or agree with me, and there's no, heart hurt over this, brother, and I mean that honestly. And I never use brother lightly.
Yeah,
Um, the the thing that I feel is that honor demands you be in check. Honor demands that you answer for anything that you've done. And honestly, if I've done something wrong, there's a famous scene, and it was a movie, and if you haven't seen it, it's actually a pretty good movie. It's got Dennis Hines, or the dancer, Gregory Hines, and Willem Dafoe in it, and they were two MPs in Saigon, and it's called Out of Bounds or Off Limits. Off Limits is what it's called. And there's this colonel, and they're saying this, that, and the other about him as he's throwing Vietnamese out of a helicopter. And they were saying he was killing whores. And he's like, "I don't do that, you know." And he said, "I'll tell you what. If I killed the whore, I'm staying in the helicopter." Because that colonel knew that his career's over. So
yeah,
if he did that crime, he'll stay in the helicopter. He goes, "If I didn't, I'll jump." And they look at him, they're shocked, and he jumps. And that's really where you have to be. If you did it, you face the music. If you
yeah.
didn't,
Fall on your sword.
you fall. Exactly, brother. I love how you get my terminology without me explaining it. But you know what I mean, man. It's honor. And it can't, I hate saying it can't be taught. It is taught. I had a great conversation this weekend with a brother, like I said, and it's taught by being rebutted by your brothers when you're wrong. You learn it that way. You can't learn it any other way than fucking up. And
Mm.
those people won't want to talk to you for a while. And, if you're a cunt, you're going to be just an asshole, and you're just going to not realize you did anything wrong. And then you realize, I won't do that again.
We have a scene over here. It's you can be a cunt, but it's okay if you're a good cunt. If you know what I mean. And what we mean by that is like you might be an absolute cunt. For example, if you're in a position of authority over other soldiers, marines under your command, and you're a cunt to them. But if you're a good cunt, and that what that means is you're a cunt for a reason. You're not just a cunt for being a cunt's sake. You're
Right.
being a cunt because it's going to further them. It's going to bring them on, and you've got their interests. And it just means that it's like that. Look, I'm going to be a cunt to you, but at the end of the day, I will fight tooth and nail to get you where you need to be to make sure that you get left alone and that your life is as good as I can make it, whilst being a cunt to you. You know, but there's a reason why I'm being a cunt to you. You know, so that's why what we call a good cunt. I'm a cunt, but I'm a good cunt.
Everybody who I ever served under had one thing they would always say to me. They'd say, "Do not lie to me. Don't ever lie to me." And I held that sacred. Do not lie to me. But I will lie for you.
Mm.
All the way up into the point of jail doors slamming on you. I'll lie and say that that's not you. But don't lie to me. Because if you lie to me, I'm done with you. A similar thing, but in the reverse. We're talking now you're under somebody, right?
Yeah.
And I've always used that too. Don't lie to me. I don't give a fuck if you did it. I'll say, nope, I don't think you did it, even if I think you did it. But if you lie to me, you're done. And I guess that's a part of the honor, you know. You're honoring your brotherhood, but you also sacrifice some honor by saying something that may not be fully truthful.
Yeah.
But, you know, you still didn't lie to that person. And so you still staying clean either way, I think. But anyways, that's my own 2 cents on that.
Yeah, and it comes down to being again under the guise of being a mentor. That person that you're mentoring is allowed to fuck up. Yeah, and nowadays again,
Exactly.
we'll use this as an example when I think we will do a show on how the military's changed over the years, and there's I see it now massively, and I did when I was running my own teams. That they say to you, the higher command say, you've got to allow your guys to make mistakes. And at one point in the past 15, 16, 17, 18 years, say, where we couldn't allow our younger team members to make mistakes because people fucking died. So it was
Right.
like, what you're saying to us is all well and good when we're sat back in camp, in barracks, where the guy fucks up and the worst thing that's going to happen to him is going to be put in a few extra guard duties. Where if he does it out here and we're about kicking some fucker's door and he fucks up, chances are people are going to die. So you can't allow people to make those kind of mistakes with such large price to pay. And again, it's that balance as a mentor when and where you allow your people, not just as your mentorees, but people that you're not mentoring, just people that might be working with you for a small period of time or whatever, to make those mistakes. You've got to be harsher than you would normally. And
Right.
again, it's been a good cunt. They might not see it at the time where they're fucked up to the point where you haven't got time to pull the bunt aside and give them, you know what I mean, feel their ass and say, like, you fucked up there, son, but this is what you've got to give them a fucking punch on the end of the nose and say, stand back, let him do it. We'll chat about this later, you know, and then give him a thumbs up afterwards to say, there's no hard feelings. Yes, I've just fucking punched you on the edge of the nose, but there's a thumbs up to say I'm not holding a grudge against you, but we need to fucking address this at a later date because this shit doesn't compute. I'm being a good cunt.
I, I
Yeah.
I get that totally, and I'm going to tell you why I say this. In barracks, in the rear with the gear, right? Somebody messes up, yeah, they're going to get office hours, whatever they're going to get, right? They're going to get their punishment. It is okay. I get that. But when you cause that to go into a combat mode and you're in a war zone, you're going to cause somebody to second guess, and maybe they don't. You don't want everybody to pull the trigger every time. And that's
Mm.
a problem I think I see more on the American side than the foreign side. But not with everybody. Tier 1 dudes and rangers and shit usually are able to keep their fingers off the trigger pretty well,
Mm.
and unless that decision needs to be taken. But yeah, like I said, it does need to be a different show because it is so valuable. If that hesitation occurs, men will die, and I've seen it in my own life in Mosul. I saw, well, I've said that story before, but we can talk about it on that show. But yes, a direct representative of mentorism and having a mentee, a well chosen mentee. I agree with you on that also. Because you can't invest all your time on everybody. That's something about with just even with training. I hear people say, yeah, I'm mentoring all these people because I'm training them. I'm like, you're not mentoring anybody. A mentorship is one person. I don't even know if you can do two people at the same time.
And I'll tell you how good at. Sorry, just putting in. I'll tell you how good at it. The mentor program. Um, Certainly, from sort of like our perspective, is snipers, especially like tier one guys. Well, not even tier one guys, just the special forces community in general. If you've ever read a book called The Red Circle by an ex Navy SEAL called Brandon Webb, outstanding fucking book.
I'll
And
read it.
basically,
I never have.
yeah, it's a real good book. He went to Buds, did Buds, and he went on to join Team 3. As a young SEAL, he was actually chosen again. You know about Glenn Doherty and the Benghazi, all that shit, yeah?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, Glenn Doherty was Brandon Webb's best friend, and they went through the Navy SEAL sniper program together. They were basically joined at the hip. And Brandon Webb took over the sniper program, the SEAL sniper program, and basically he just tore it down to grassroots and rebuilt it. And it's basically the sniper pairs. He mentored Chris Kyle. He mentored both Luttrell brothers, and it's usually one mentor to two snipers, and it's to the point where it's like mentoring one person in reality, because the people that you've got in front of you, they've got the same end
Same
goal.
same
Yeah,
skill set. Same
yeah,
skill set. I could
same.
see how that could work, but I'm talking about deep mentorship.
Yeah,
Especially some bastard like me. Um, Trust me, man. I'll never forget in Army Basic. This is at 17. This is no bullshit story. This is for real. Um, I walked into the dude. We would do road marches all the time. It was stupid backpack. You know how the life is, right?
mm,
And I was complaining like a little cunt. I'll admit everything that I did that was fucked up. But I had a drill sergeant that was a phenomenal guy. He was a Navajo Indian. His name was Platero, Mike Platero. I'm going to give him a shout out because this is exactly what he needed to do. I stepped through the door bitching one day, and you had like a hallway that went to one squad bay to the other, and then to the latrines. You had two doors, and the first door was after you came through that first door and to get into the squad bay. And from the side, my left side, which was a squad bay entrance, all of a sudden some dude, because we were on a road march, and it was only because I saw it, and I got a funny picture on my page that you know of, where I put his hat on. This is after all this shit happened. And it's funny how I did it, but we'll talk about that another day offline. But he pushed me through the latrine door. It was just a swinging type door. And there's a wall instantly after you come through that. And I hit that wall, and he said, Shuff, you've had your head in your ass for 2 weeks. I'm about to pull it out, and if you fucking say something, I will say, yes, I did it, but I don't think you will. And he beat the mortal fuck out of me. And I learned something from that. Stop bitching. I was
mm.
winching about everything.
Stop
And
being that guy.
I was a cunt. And me and Neil Moranto went up for Honor Man for graduation for the whole company, and Neil beat me out, and that's cool. And I will forever and to this day thank Drill Sergeant Mike Platero for that. And I mean that.
Yeah, again, it's that being a good cunt, if you know what I mean. Yeah, at the time when Fist was meeting Jawbone, he's not a good cunt. You're thinking, what the fuck? But it's afterwards, and that might be seconds afterwards, it might be hours afterwards, it could be days afterwards, where you think, I warranted that fucking beatdown, and I've had more than my
Hell
fair share.
yeah. Hell
I've
yeah.
I've I've warranted my fair share, and there's been a fair share that I've not warranted, and I've thought that's
Yep.
fucking out of order. But that again, for another show, that was just the military back then, where a beatdown wasn't something that happened once in a blue moon. They happened on the fucking regular, and most of the time they were for a reason. It's because it was a more adult army then. It was a more, you know what I mean? It was segregated a lot more from society, where it was what civvies do. What civvies do. We ain't fucking civvies. What that cattle does is what it does. We are professional soldiers, and
Right.
we govern our own. And this is how we do it. We do it through harsh words and fucking letters of a complaint. It's usually harsh word punched in the fucking face. You know, sort the problem out there. And again, and I'll touch on the next show because we'll definitely have to do that one. Is how the military's changed.
Yep.
It was I was getting punched in the fucking face in South Armagh, and I didn't know what I'd done wrong. I had to figure the fucker out for myself. But when I did figure it out, I made sure I didn't do the fucking thing again.
Fuck
And
yeah.
I think that's all we'll say on that without digressing and going and broaching too much into our sort of like next show, if you know what I mean. But
I
yeah,
agree, brother. This, as always, is epic shows with Baz. Um, I there's reasons we both have a lot of respect for each other, and that's all I'll say on this mic. Baz, stick around, mute yourself. I'm gonna play the outro, and then we will continue on for a couple seconds because I want to. I agree, man. It deserves a second show, brother. And
yeah.
you'll probably be able to hear everything, but once you mute yourself, nobody will hear you. But I'm gonna do the outro, right?
It's been a pleasure. Been a pleasure, brother. And again, to all listeners, raise a glass. Have a good one. Stay safe. Stay low. Move fast.
Semper
Pass out.
Fi, Teflon coated, one each, baby. All right, much love. Here we go. Inside Enemy Headquarters. You guys know where it comes from. Axon Ghost. Gotta love him. I enjoy his music. Please go to his channel on YouTube. Axon Ghost. God bless, be well, be safe. Shove out.